The Sith Order is literally known for producing evil individuals. Each and every Sith Lord did terrible things in their pursuit of power, besides a few rare exceptions such as the Sith Lord Darth Vectivus. There are Sith who have decided to turn entire people groups into mutated creatures for their own benefit. Sith that went as far as enslaving or annihilating entire planets in the pursuit of their goals. With all of that said though, and all the atrocities of the Sith, for today's holocron, we believe that we have found the most vile and depraved Sith of them all. The Dark Lord of the Sith that would make Darth Sidious shiver, in the form of Darth Vitiate. The man who went by many names and identities was by far one of the worst men or beings to ever exist in galactic history. Tenebrae, Vitiate, Emperor, Valkorion, whatever name you wish to call him by. This was the man that we have deduced to be the Sith so evil that he outclasses even Sidious in his cruelty. In today's holocron, we are going to detail all of the most horrible deeds, as well as talk about exactly what separates him from other Sith in terms of their malevolence. But before we open the holocron, we have noticed a few acolytes that have been delving into some of our deep lore. We forbid no knowledge in our archives, but consider subscribing so that you may be updated whenever we post our daily holocrons. Now acolytes, let us observe the dark heart of Vitiate. The vile deeds of Vitiate begin at his very birth, which is to say that he was essentially born evil. There are no records or understanding as to why he was born this way, but he came out acting like no other child had before, even for a Sith pureblood. Born unto the pure-blooded species by the name Tenebrae, Vitiate came out with eyes black as the void, and he never cried. This was all topped off by the fact that he seemed to act with a strange weight and intellect beyond his years, as if he knew he was destined for something terrible. When the boy was 6 years old, he made his first mark on his home world. The young pureblood had shown signs of being gifted with the Force. Ordinarily, this would have been a good thing for a pureblood. However, his farmer father was suspicious because neither he nor his wife had the abilities to touch the Force. The mother's betrayal turned out to be true, as she had had an affair with a Sith Lord by the name of Lord Drama. Tenebrae fed off of the farmer's rage and would snap his neck through the Force just because he could. He then spent the next several months torturing his mother for her betrayal of their family, before murdering her also. As a young man, Tenebrae proceeded to subjugate his home village and would grow in power until being confronted by his true father, Lord Drama. Their interaction was very short, as of course, Drama didn't claim Tenebrae as his son, and Tenebrae simply would strip the man of his power within the Force, shocking the Dark Lord. From that moment on, Tenebrae claimed ownership over the entire planet, as Nathema was his, and he would rule it with an iron fist, becoming a cruel oppressor who would frequently torture and kill his citizens for entertainment. By the age of 9, Tenebrae was not only a warlord, but ruled an entire planet. And here is where he began exhibiting traits of a god complex. Typically these things are pretty standard for Sith. However, we bring this up as a special case because there was no one to teach Tenebrae how to act or how to conduct himself as a Sith. Tenebrae already naturally knew, and his student was the dark side itself. Again, it is not explained in the lore why Tenebrae was like this. However, our theory is that it may have something to do with the fact that he was born of a Sith Lord, and therefore adopted the dark side before he was ever even born. Perhaps even a unique phenomenon in the dark side itself, who therefore chose to adopt Tenebrae as its dark side student. Something is clear though, Tenebrae was unique and was favored by the dark side itself. Many would go on to speculate that Tenebrae was perhaps the chosen Sith in the Sith Ari. Either way, this was only the beginning of the life of vile depravity of this Sith Lord. Perhaps the most notably horrific thing that Tenebrae is known for is called the Ritual of Nathema. It was here that this man cemented himself as the being that was truly only in it for himself, an enemy of every living thing, Sith, Jedi, or anything else. After having taken the name Darth Vitiate for himself, he would lay low on Nathema for decades, studying the ways of the dark side as it whispered to him endlessly, growing exponentially in power and knowledge, his god complex going even further. At the conclusion of the Great Hyperspace War and the destruction of the Sith Naga Sadow, the remaining Lords of the Sith had absolutely nowhere to flee, with the Jedi and the Republic determined to murder every Sith in the known galaxy for their crimes. The Republic had taken Korriban, and all the remnants of the Great Sith Empire were dispersed. It was here that Vitiate seized what he called an opportunity and sent out a message to all the remaining Lords of the Sith to gather together on Nathema, promising them all that he had discovered a ritual that would cement their victory against the Republic and Jedi in eternity. Over 8,000 of the remaining Sith Lords answered the call and preservation of their people. However, Vitiate had betrayed them, and as soon as everyone landed on the world, we did see him perform a ritual, but not the one he had promised the Sith. Vitiate would dominate their simple minds with the Force, as he had studied the ability of mind control and manipulation, and he would use it quite frequently in his life on many occasions, including the time that he forced Revan and Malak to the dark side of the Force. In the ritual though, Vitiate would use the power to take over the minds of all the Sith Lords and force them to perform an act so vile that it would change the course of galactic history. The ritual of Nathema became one of the greatest atrocities of the Force itself, as it siphoned the life out of every living thing on the planet, including all of the Sith, the planet itself, all being used to fuel one purpose: to increase the power of Vitiate. Nathema died and became a husk completely devoid of even the Force. Its atmosphere was poison and became gray, and all things on the planet were drained of their color. Sound was even muffled and muted, and no wind ever blew on the world again. Nathema was the epitome of nothingness, a barren wasteland. No life resided there whatsoever, and any Force sensitive who came to the planet would not be able to sense anything of it or use the Force at all. Some Force sensitives who tried to stay on the planet too long would even find themselves slowly slipping into insanity, unable to feel light, warmth, or any happiness. A true abomination, so much so that it was enough for even the Sith most loyal to Vitiate to question themselves. Thousands of years would pass when the reconstituted Sith Empire, still growing in the unknown regions, and a few members of the Dark Council, such as Darth Nihilus, began plotting a conspiracy to overthrow Vitiate after finding Nathema and the annihilation that was wrought there. They considered Vitiate to be a madman and wanted to overthrow him. Even the Sith disgusted by what he had done. Lord Scourge, one of the diplomats of the Sith, put it like this: destruction he understood, enslavement he understood, but what happened on Nathema was total annihilation, and it was unforgivable. This was not the last time that Vitiate would betray the Sith, nor was it the last time he destroyed an entire world to feed his own ego and power. The next time would be on Ziost, after Vitiate attempted to resurrect Darth Revan, and after Revan was defeated, Vitiate's spirit took control of every Sith on the world of Ziost, beginning to drain their life in order to fuel his own. Republic ships and Jedi were sent to investigate this phenomenon before they were also taken control of and drained of their life essences as well. The spirit of Vitiate then drained Ziost of all of its life before going further into the unknown regions in order to avoid the Republic, eventually finding the planet of Zakul. In both of these cases, the Sith were merely a means to an end for Vitiate, and he didn't even care at all what they had sacrificed for the Empire. An empire that he once controlled as their emperor. Even some of the most evil and deprived Sith in history still cared for their empire and its well-being. Cared for the Sith even. Cared for what the Order represented. Vitiate, though, didn't care about any of it. Vitiate was willing to sacrifice them if it meant fueling his own power or gaining more life for himself. But now, let's switch things up a little bit and talk about the more personal deeds of Vitiate. Away from the destroying of orders and entire planets, what did Vitiate do on a personal level that was so foul? Starting with torturing Jedi to sway them to the dark side, that being nothing new for the Sith. But perhaps what is new is doing it on one man for 300 years. The hero known as Revan would not get his happy ending with Bastila or enjoy his family that he had spent so long fighting for. After everything the Jedi Revan did in service of the Republic and the Jedi Order, Revan insisted on going back to the unknown regions to stop Vitiate, as he knew that there was a threat laying in wait to destroy the Republic once again. Revan, though, failed in his task, and was captured instead by Vitiate and tortured endlessly in an effort to bring Darth Revan back, extracting information about the Republic and about the Jedi. Revan never got to see the birth of his child, or be there for Bastila's death in her old age. Revan would outlive many of his descendants until the Grand Master Satele Shan. All the while, Revan valiantly using his power through all of the agony to hold Vitiate back from launching his attacks. Using all of his influence, Vitiate never gave up though, and ensured Revan stayed alive to feel every bit of suffering that Vitiate had planned. Speaking of suffering, as a reward to Lord Scourge for handing Revan over to him, Vitiate decided to give Scourge immortality like he possessed. What he neglected to tell Lord Scourge was that this method of eternal life would put him in a perpetual state of unending agony, the likes of which never dulled with age, but only dulled when you got used to it, a fact that Scourge only learned after he had undergone the process. But now that we've discussed what he did with his underlings, what about his family? Very Sith in history actually had families, and if they did, it was usually a family that treated each other cruelly and allowed hatred and discourse to flourish. However, Vitiate, now calling himself Emperor Valkorion, would take a much different approach to family. Valkorion didn't act in ways that specifically antagonized his two sons, Arcan and Thexan, but rather, his hundreds of years as a Sith Emperor taught him something more sinister, and that being manipulation. He played the long game, waiting years until the boys were old enough. All the while, he neglected them and showed absolutely no love or approval to anything they did, no matter how substantial, no matter how much they improved in combat and in the Force, no matter who they killed for him. His two sons obsessed over their father's approval, but they still held their bond as brothers. This was until the war, and when Valkorion drove Arcan to his breaking point. In a whirlwind of emotion, Arcan attempted to murder Valkorion before being stopped by his brother. In a brief duel, Arcan killed his twin in cold blood, and only after doing so did Valkorion ever acknowledge him. Around the same time, Valkorion had also taken his daughter Vaylin away from her mother and had her brought to cultists, placing her in a facility where she would be tortured and mind-controlled into becoming a monster of the dark side, with Valkorion sensing she was the most untamed but powerful of his children, fitting for a man only interested in whatever power others could give him. In the end though, attempting to control Vaylin would result in his downfall. But perhaps all of this pales in comparison to what Valkorion's ultimate plan was, his endgame. Valkorion wanted to be a god. In fact, he believed that the Force literally belonged to him. He commanded it. He was the very god of the Force itself. His plan came down to the notion that he would simply become too powerful to control by absorbing all life that stood in his way. His end goal being the total annihilation of the universe, starting with the galaxy, so that one day he could form his own galaxy. And if he grew bored of that one, he would destroy it as well. And this is where it lies in complete contrast with Lord Sidious. This single grand plan makes him far worse than anything Palpatine ever did. In a famous conversation between Lord Sidious and Vader, after Vader has continuously killed high-ranking Imperials, Palpatine has a quote that says, "I do not wish to rule over a galaxy of the dead." The statement being a direct quote from the canon comics. Sidious had plans to be sure as well. He did kill a lot of people and even destroyed worlds himself. But nowhere was Sidious ever attempting to destroy all life in the galaxy. Never was even Sidious so arrogant as to believe that the dark side was his. Perhaps the only Sith Lord that we can compare such a thing to would be Darth Nihilus. But even Nihilus never reached the levels of accomplishment that Valkorion, Vitiate, and Tenebrae would. We might even go as far to say that Valkorion was even more successful in his mission of absolute power and chaos than Abeloth was, a literal Force entity. So what are we to say about Lord Vitiate? He was a man that was ready to destroy everything, even the Force, even the universe. Everything if it meant absolute power for himself and no others. Jedi, Sith, blood, or anything. He was so vile that he made even the Sith, such as Scourge and Darth Maul, turn against him and even see the light. He destroyed the lives of billions, stole the childhoods and adulthoods away from people who did not deserve it, including his own family. The legacy of Vitiate was a black stain on even the history of the Sith. The Sith even despised this guy and thought that he took things too far. The Sith Empire would even team with the Republic briefly in order to destroy Vitiate. Many Sith Lords aspire to reach this level of power, but never this level of madness. And that, my friends, and fellow acolytes of the Force, is the most evil Sith Lord to have ever existed in all of the Star Wars lore. And now, after this lengthy holocron, I turn it to you. What are your thoughts on the vile, evil, and sinister Lord Vitiate? Do you agree with our pick with the most evil Sith Lord in all of Star Wars lore? And what are your thoughts on this terrible being of the dark side itself? As always, my friends, be wary of the dark and have a great day.